CosmicRadio.TV. Hello, welcome to the fine edition of my so-called 8-Bit Life. I'm your host, Roberto Villegas. Joining me today, emergency guest, Patrick.
Back to my old ways. I think literally the first time or second time I was ever on this show, it was an emergency guest spot. And
yeah, it's strange.
I happened to look at Twitter when you
said,
"Oh no, I got canceled."
So I won't say
like,
who it was because we are going to get him back. And,
yeah, people. Hey, life happens.
Right, and it was he emailed me this morning about the emergency, and I woke up to a stream. I woke up to the email. I was like, "Well, crap, yeah," because I can't tell him like, "Yeah, don't be on." I'm like, no, it's okay. As life happens, and I was like, well. There might not be like I was planning on either seeing who was going to be free Thursday, record it then, and go accordingly. And then Patrick's like, "Well, if you want to guess, I'm downstairs."
I live downstairs.
That was better.
So
I was like,
I have a night off. I'm not doing anything, so
just come.
There's
come
no
on
wrestling to watch.
Yeah, I guess. Well, yeah, that's right. That's those are Monday nights
and Tuesdays. Technically, there is wrestling to watch on Wednesday, but it's a pre-taped show.
So okay,
and I'm not that invested.
So
let
me see if I remember correctly. We have Monday Night Raw. Is Thursday still SmackDown?
SmackDown is now
Tuesdays?
Tuesday, and it's live. It's not a recorded show.
Okay, so SmackDown,
and they have separate rosters. So basically,
right. I was
there's two channels.
Two chains.
Two like
and those chains eventually meet at like SummerSlam.
Yes, at the Big Four pay-per-views.
Right. Okay.
We're starting right now the build for SummerSlam.
Right. All right. I understand now. Okay. And then there's what is it? The WWE. Is it Next?
NXT.
That's
which is their
like bleeding edge
developmental,
right?
Which is which has become sort of a combination of people WWE wish were good at wrestling and indie guys who want to get off of the indie train
and break out
and have like a regular, predictable schedule.
The only
reason
I know about that is like a lot of those events I think happen in Florida sometimes.
Yeah, they film at Full Sail. They have a studio there. Although I've heard rumor they're looking for a bigger place because they pack Full Sail.
Yeah, my friend, friend of the show, fan of the show, nerdcore hip hop artist, IQ, Chris Allen. He lives in Orlando, so he's been at the next.
It's one of those
NTX bench.
One of those things I'd love to go see.
NXT.
I got to see when they were in San Antonio, Rumble Weekend. Their big live
Jackie
show.
here in the chat room says eyes glaze over with sports.
It's
ball
not
talk.
sports ball. It's professional wrestling.
Which
it is not a sport.
It is sports entertainment.
It is sports entertainment. It is theater, but with death-defying stunts.
Speaking of sports entertainment, have you seen the 30 for 30 on the XFL?
Yeah. Yes, I have.
Those. By the way, for those in the chat room, and we're broadcasting both to YouTube and Twitch, so whatever you're watching on, welcome. If you're watching on either, if you have not checked, ESPN does this sort of documentary series, 30 for 30, where it's 30
Well,
directors.
It started out as 30 for the 30th anniversary of ESPN.
Right.
And it was the best thing ESPN had done in 30 years.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's continued since.
And what's funny is I think that will probably outlive anything ESPN does.
I don't have cable. I haven't watched ESPN as a regular viewer in probably 5 years.
You've paid for 30 for 30.
I love 30 for 30.
I do too.
I will go out of my way to hunt them down. I will sign into my parents' cable account.
I bought a because I now have PlayStation View and I'm able to watch live stream television. Mm-hmm. I had flipped on one of the 30 for 30s on PS View, saw commercials, said "fuck this," and I immediately paid for it on Amazon and bought the subscription for this year's 30 for 30.
They're almost universally good. Now, some are better than others.
For sure.
But so many of them are are brilliant. Whether or not, like, I've watched everything there is about 80s and 90s basketball. I don't care about basketball as a sport. I never really have since childhood.
There's
like, I will watch about any 1980s or early 90s college team that made a run in the Final Four. I don't care who it is. I'll watch it.
So to give a really quick explainer, basically it is 30 documentaries done by 30
different directors. And some of them are people you've heard of, and some of them made their name literally making a 30 for 30.
So, and for those who, and even if you've not watched a 30 for 30, you know of one. And it was such a deep subject. There are technically 2 documentaries, and one is a miniseries by the theoretical, by all this stuff. One is, and I have to look at the date. I always have to look at this date because it's such a, it's one of those dates that I never remember, and I'll never ever remember.
We're talking about the OJ.
Well, there's OJ
Chase.
Made in America,
yeah,
which is a miniseries, which is technically
it's in the 30 for 30 family, but that one's sort of something above and beyond the typical 30 for 30, which are range from like 60-minute to 2 hours. Most of them are in sort of the 60 to 90-minute range, with a couple that are longer. There's some that have sequels. So like there's 2 about the University of Miami.
We're coming up ironically enough, we're coming up in 7 days on the anniversary. But the date is June 14th. The name of the documentary is June 14th, 1990. Bitch of a type. Let's see.
I feel like it's 2.
Yeah, it's like 1994.
1994.
Yeah, I think that's what it's gonna be.
That's a weird documentary too.
Yeah.
Have you ever watched that one? Like,
yeah.
It's sort of the anti-documentary. It is literally just the TV coverage of everything that happened that day, which was absurd.
Honestly, it might be my favorite documentary.
It's such an oddball one from a filmmaking perspective.
But that's why I think I like it, because it's just like really cool. Like it's like for me, a lot of my favorite sort of content stuff or slice of life stuff to a certain degree, especially when it comes to anime.
That is very much.
And it's such a weird.
It's a day of news basically.
Well, because like
compressed into a documentary.
Because the craziest thing about that day, and I talked about this before, but when it comes to June 17th, 1994. This is a very much the day, for those who have no idea, it was the day that was the white Bronco chase, which is the one that OJ said he might kill himself, and then leading all the fun trial. Anyways, the point being,
that has been parodied a million times.
Right. These are all the things that happened in sports.
I'm familiar with some of these, but not all.
These are all the things that the documentary happened. And the crazy thing about this is that all these amazing things in sports history are going on. And every one of the footage, and that was a really eye-opening portion of it. Everybody was cutting back to the OJ thing
because it was the most
everybody.
I was 8 years old.
Yeah, I know.
And I remember OJ vividly.
Yeah.
I remember like the next year when I was in 4th grade that some kid for Halloween dressed up as Judge Ito, and it was the best Halloween costume in history. Think about that. A 4th grader dressed as Judge Lance Ito. That is what the world was like.
So the events detailed in the documentary that occurred during the chase of Simpson are as follows. Arnold Palmer playing his final round at the U.S. Open.
Wow.
Yeah, Arnold Palmer, for those who have no idea, is a big golf player.
Also creator of the greatest beverage in history.
The Arnold Palmer.
The Arnold Palmer of iced tea and lemonade. Or my variation of choice, the John Daly, which is where you dump vodka
here's a
into
personal
that.
favorite of mine, because at the time I actually had a sticker book for this, and I'm starting to get back into soccer. This makes all sense. The commencement of the 1994 FIFA World Cup.
Oh my God, World Cup '94 started
the first time in the United States.
Yes, I remember.
Yes,
'94 vividly.
Yes,
that was like
yes.
Oh my God!
So
I did not know that started that day too.
The New York Rangers celebrating their win at the Stanley Cup Finals with a ticker tape parade on Broadway. It took place earlier in the day, but it was largely unaffected by the OJ events. But still, this is the kicker one, because this in its own right would be a big fucking deal right now. And to think that they had to go, we're sorry to interrupt, but Game 5 of the NBA Finals between Houston Rockets and the New York Knicks.
Oh yeah, and that was like
yes.
There's another documentary that includes that finals.
Yeah,
that's the 30 for 30.
Yeah,
but yeah, the Rockets, like the Hakeem Olajuwon.
Yep.
Rockets versus Patrick Ewing and the Knicks.
And they're through this whole broadcast like, we're sorry to interrupt the NBA Finals, Game 5 of the playoffs, like one of the biggest sporting events in the United States, and they're cutting back to the Bronco chase.
because it was the most amazing thing we had ever seen. And plus, you had the fact that LA loves a car chase, so they were prepared for it. They had all of the news helicopters you could ever imagine.
And here's the last one. Ken Griffey Jr. tying Babe Ruth's record for the most home runs before June 30th and the team's 65th game of the season.
Wow.
So all these things happened
Can
on
we
that.
just talk about how great Ken Griffey Jr. was?
Oh, yeah.
And how unappreciated he is because Barry Bonds broke all those records because he was on the juice.
Look, does Bonds have a Super Nintendo game?
No, he doesn't
That's exactly there.
No, because that game is amazing. I literally just bought it not that long ago for Super Nintendo because I remember renting it from the video store as a child.
So but
also like Ken Griffey Jr., I hope history will remember him as well as I do, because there was like this period in the early 90s where everyone was sure he was going to be the greatest baseball player ever, and he ended up being a very good baseball player.
Right.
Maybe even a great player, but never quite living up to the hype of his first 2 or 3 seasons.
No.
But he's a great player.
For sure.
He's a Hall of Famer.
It's so funny, but yeah, when you look back at all that data there,
yeah,
it's just it's mind-boggling how all those things happen on that exact day.
Yeah. It's like any given week in 2017.
Right, for sure.
It is. It's literally 1 week in 2017, but all at the same day.
Only for that one, it's cool because it's all these different like big moments in sports, in sports history.
All being overshadowed
by
a slow driving white Ford Bronco.
That also happens to be a big sports moment in sports history.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, all these, whether it be the because I would even say like what year was it that we started doing the like all the steroid things?
Steroid stuff was, I think,
from
the
baseball?
early 2000s. I mean, it went back into accusations in the 90s.
Yeah, because like that would be
because
I would say that's
steroids got to be a thing in the late 80s.
Like I'd say that's a big moment in history in sports.
But like,
history too,
like Barry Bonds breaking the record, and then the court case a couple of years later,
right?
Where suddenly Sammy Sosa doesn't speak English.
Yeah.
Anyone who's ever seen an interview with Sammy Sosa, guy speaks perfect English.
Oh yeah, no.
In courtroom, not so much.
No
habla.
No habla inglés.
Yeah.
Pinche gringo. But yeah, no, there's like that. I'd say any of your respective strikes for any of your respective sports things. All
most of those
important.
were the baseball strike, man.
I'd say the one that really that really screwed things over. That really.
It's the baseball strike. You look at at the fan level of baseball pre the strike.
That's true, I guess.
And that it was completely replaced by football within a year or two.
I would say baseball
still hasn't recovered.
I would say baseball won the last hockey one.
The last hockey one was bad for hockey, but hockey is a niche sport.
That's true.
In most of the country.
Yeah.
Like, you're from Michigan, so like
I'm aware.
You grew up with hockey as
I was
a
aware
thing.
of that strike, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting, again, looking at all that stuff, and that's where the 30 for 30 docs, I think, are really good, because they're all very solid docs.
Almost all of them.
And when I say solid,
there are some that I think are boring and won't watch again, but most of them are really good. Some of them are like some of my favorite documentaries.
Yeah, that's sort of what it is for me. Most of them are I like one of the really cool one I think was it was I gotta remember who the guy was, but it's this guy that eventually worked for Nike. I know
the what's his face, the basketball shoe guy.
Yeah, and I don't remember. I think that
what's his name? He is the most wonderful Italian name,
because he was talking about like all the like.
It's called Soul Man.
Soul Man, right?
SOLE, Soul Man.
I think that's a 30 for
Sunny something or other.
I don't know if that's a
Vaccaro.
30 for 30. Yeah,
it is a 30 for 30.
Okay, because there's 2 documentaries of them. There's one on college. The college.
There's one. He's in another one, but he basically is the guy who told Nike, "No, give all of the money to Michael Jordan when he comes out of college."
Yeah,
and he's the guy who told, I think, Adidas, give all the money to Allen Iverson and Tracy McGrady and like all of the, and he was at Nike whoever he was, Reebok or Adidas, telling them to give all the money to LeBron, and they didn't.
Yeah.
And somebody else did, and that worked out for them. But he also
he
post his career was like, this whole shoe thing is a little bit messed up.
Yeah. Well, because he talked about like how college and all, like it's a really
basically putting shoe money into everything from like college basketball down to like AAU teams getting
it was
essentially sponsored.
Yeah, it was kind of. I mean, he even admits like this is fucked up.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story of like this dude and him coming to terms with like, did I ruin the sport I love?
Yeah, and there's that one
and his sort of fight to change.
There's a lot of really cool. Just looks back on certain teams that you'll hear about. Like, I mean, like I learned a lot more about like the '80s basketball.
'80s basketball, like between the college and NBA ones, there's so many good ones. Some will make you cry, some will make you laugh. But like Winning Time, which is about Reggie Miller and the Pacers.
Yep.
And specifically like Reggie Miller versus Spike Lee. I
remember that shit
because he's just like Spike Lee's biggest troll ever, and an enormous Knicks fan. And Reggie Miller's one of the best trash talkers in the history of the NBA.
Yep.
And just their legendary bouts during the NBA Finals.
There's some fun stuff, and I think that's kind of the real cool part of the.
So yes, if you have cable.
Even if you don't, you can get Quartz.
Yes, but like if you have cable, you probably can watch some of these for free.
Right. There used to be, there might still be some on Netflix.
They took most of them
off. And that's sort of where I got hooked into it was for Netflix. But then I started going like, well, because again, getting back to sort of our original topic, because you brought WWE, they done a recent one on the XFL, and for those who don't remember that weird moment in time when Vince McMahon. Guy that formed the WW. I think at the time WWF.
It was still F, because it was. Yeah. It changed in like 01?
Right.
02?
And the thing is that if you know anything about the history of football, this isn't the first time.
No, there's another great 30 for 30 about
on the USFL.
On the USFL,
and why Donald Trump fucked it, and why Donald Trump fucked it over.
Yes.
Yeah,
if you want to hate Donald Trump more, go watch Who Killed the USFL.
What was funny was watching that doc opened my eyes to like, oh, this is the man we're going to deal with. And it's so funny how that's playing out in real life.
Yeah, nothing has changed.
Yeah.
Literally
nothing at all. And Small Potatoes is like this really cool eye-opening doc, really good doc in general, because it's just like, wow, that's the motherfucker. That we knew about him then, and we couldn't do shit then. If I had a time machine, there might be some I may do some things.
I'm pretty sure if you have a time machine, that's not the one you're going for.
I don't know.
In terms of bad dudes in history, he's not there yet.
That's one I think that won't affect the timeline as much.
Well, we haven't seen yet.
All right, I don't.
I think we don't need a time machine to solve this problem at this moment.
Right.
That will hopefully not change.
But anyways, but regardless of that, watching the XFL one, like I had no idea when the XFL launched that NBC was losing its NFL broadcast rights. I had no clue. I'm like, oh, that makes a whole lot of, like all these things started coming. I'm like, oh, this makes so much sense because I remember the first game and the guy got injured. I remember watching that as a kid going like, what happened to this guy? And it's like, yeah, he's now out for the season. I was like, oh crap. Well, that sucks for him.
Yeah. It like everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
It was such a weird thing. Like as a kid, I mean, it's cool when you look back and look at what the XFL brought forward to the table in terms of like the broadcast stuff that we see now as sort of standard, which is like
the big
tech was really
big
cool.
fly cam that runs over every sporting event,
miking all the players.
XFL, that's where that came from.
I was like,
having cameramen on the field was an XFL thing. Like basically, everything you love about current football broadcast was pretty much stolen from them.
Yeah.
Now everything else they screwed up.
Oh yeah.
Like everything.
like they it's so funny because and this happens with any broadcast television a lot. But when you're low in the ratings, you'll take chances. When you're not low in the ratings, you won't take chances. And like there was like the moment of that they had like a really big guest for SNL, and SNL was like just starting.
They had J-Lo.
They had Jets,
right. Because that's the era we're talking here when J-Lo was a big freaking deal.
God, it's so fun. It was so, It was such,
and they finally had a good game, and it went into overtime, and it was amazing. and so
it went like to
the
triple overtime or some shit like that.
Dick Ebersol and Vince McMahon go like way back. Like, like WWF in the '80s had several network specials on NBC. Because Vince and Dick Ebersol, like,
that was probably the coolest part of that doc was seeing seeing Vince talk about this, wishing it had taken off, but was totally cool on a friendship level with this guy. Because most
like they had been friends for so long.
Well, but even the idea of like he knew on a business level that this just wasn't this wasn't working out.
But this is what you have to understand. WWF was so profitable at this time that this colossal fuck up barely touched that company.
Right.
Like this, I think somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 to $30 million they lost.
Something like that.
WWE, like, this was the height of the Stone Cold Steve Austin era and The Rock and, like, everyone who was amazing that, made
because even to the point where, like, the opening ceremony is like, if you smell what the XFL is cooking, like, basically just, and they aped a lot of, because the hard part was, and
they were trying to make football more entertaining.
Right.
Which eventually, and through non-traditional means. Now, some of it was terrible, but some of it was really clever.
Yeah, no, there's some really, like, again, on the, there are certain things I think that, and it's such a hard thing, because I remember even at the time, the XFL was just, was a joke. And only because, not because wrestling was a joke, but because at the time, and we could argue
Vince McMahon at the time was played a ludicrous character on TV.
Is that, like,
and everyone was like, no, that's who he really is, but it wasn't, but it was, but it
right,
wasn't.
because he was playing himself. He was
playing this sort of evil version of himself.
So
which, if you talk to someone who's watched wrestling long enough, might actually just be himself. I'm of the opinion there's some truth to that character.
So, ultimately, what we tend to do in entertainment, if we can't act ourselves. And wrestling, a lot of times, even if you can act, that this is what you're supposed to do, is you basically take an aspect of your personality and you ramp it up to 11. A lot of streamers do this. A lot of internet people do this. If you're fans of, like, Funhouse, like Lawrence will latch onto something and do that. And a lot of times it's a very easy tactic to do, because it's not hard to act like you. And it's not hard to act like you to the nth degree, because you know what that is. So I imagine that there's an aspect of Vince McMahon that is that, and
yes,
and that's just a businessman.
It literally, so the whole character came out of the Montreal screw job when Vince McMahon screwed Bret Hart, and in context of what happened, you understand why what happened, but it made him a bad guy on TV, and at that point he really wasn't a TV personality outside of having previously done commentary.
Right.
But that's sort of like...
But you always... And again...
But, like, then he became this Mr. McMahon character who was out to screw everyone.
Which is such an easy, on a story level, it's such an easy thing to have, because you then...
And then you have Stone Cold Steve Austin, who just wants to beat up his boss. And anyone who's ever had a bad job wanted to give their boss a Stone Cold Stunner.
Right. And the thing is,
you have perfection.
And it's like, we all know that this, like Stone, Steve himself, probably now is like, yeah, Vince was a great guy,
Sometimes. They get along, but, like, there was
in as much as
there was always a few drops of truth mixed in with the story.
I'll put it this way: in as much as any director can be a good guy, any boss can be a good guy, in as much as somebody that you eventually have to deal a contract negotiation with.
Yeah,
and that's what I mean, and that that's the character you saw was. Contract mode and also too, it's easier to have this, if you think about your famous stories in history and even your stories in fiction, it's very easy for the audience to latch on to the rebel team. It's easy to launch on to the underdogs and typically you have the big corporation, or the joke was, I think in one of the Homestar Runner games made by Telltale, Strong Bad is fighting the municipality. which is ran by King of Town and a whole bunch of other weird shit. And it becomes sort of 1984 kind of parody.
And literally WWF called it the corporation.
Right, exactly. The corporation.
That was the name of Vince McMahon and all of his minions.
Right, and again, it was this like the corporation, this dark thing.
Yes.
No one knows. And then you have and now you've continued that I think with Triple H is like the
he's the bad authority figure.
Right.
He's sort of him and Stephanie have kind of combined to replace Vince as the bad guy in charge.
Because again, it's a very easy writing mechanic. Yeah. And so, and the thing with wrestling as a storytelling kind of mechanic, as now we've all been sort of we're no longer talking about whether it's real or not. We know that this is story driven. We know that there's athleticism to what they do for sure. But we know that whoever, the winner or loser is determined by the script, which is not a problem.
It's live theater with death-defying stunts.
Right, exactly.
And the minute you start looking at it through that lens, it makes a lot more sense.
Right, it
can make you feel things.
For sure, and that's the thing. That's
in the same way that theater can make you feel things.
That's the thing. That's the idea behind it. So now that we know that, it's very, a lot of things done in theater is less about, like if you think about like a movie, you have the ability to do different angles of a shot, and a lot of in film we talk about what the lens can see, and you can kind of have fun with that, like with depth of field. You can do things like forced perspective stuff, where you can have a man that is normally 5'11" and his cohort is 6'2". You can make the cohort the Hobbit and shrink him down to 4 feet because it's easy. And you have the ability to do it with sets, and you have all these kind of things. Like there's always that optical illusion of who's the tallest of this thing? And it's like, would you guess it's the short one because we have this at an angle and that kind of bullshit.
Because Tom Cruise is standing on a stack of boxes.
He always is. By the way, I was at work last night and they had the TV on there. Tom Cruise hasn't aged at all. I want to know who is that what Scientology does? Like you can sacrifice it's
the placenta eating.
Okay. That makes sense because he has not aged. Like you look at him, then he's just like fuck. He looks like he's like it's Jerry Maguire.
He also might have the best surgeon in Hollywood,
probably. Only because the Mummy's coming out. There's some cool. There actually some cool. But going back to the whole thing of that. So you have in theater this idea that you don't have camera angles, so you have these simple sets usually.
Well, in wrestling, you do,
but only if you're watching a broadcast.
But if you're in a person, it's a totally different.
Well, because that's who they're playing to that audience. They're not. Yeah, they're not playing.
Well, yes and no. So if you go, this is the difference between WWE and everyone else. Is in WWE, the hardest part is learning how to play for camera because you're expected to.
Okay.
Whereas if you go see your local wrestling show, they're just trying to play to the whole audience, which is usually on 4 sides. And it is in a WWE show, but they are taught and,
but I guess
trained to play to camera.
I guess what I mean is it's different than because even broadcast television fiction is more akin to film than theater. Mm-hmm. Whereas
unless you have a straight up one camera show,
which
really don't exist,
right? Exactly. And so what I guess I mean is that you typically in theater have to you would whereas in film you could get away with an internal monologue voiceover maybe, and even then you wouldn't do it. You just kind of have that weird, you're like what, you do a close up, zoom in, pan, whatever kind of thing. You can do that in wrestling, and you can do that to a certain degree when you start when you don't get on mic kind of thing before they fight off.
But it's mostly at a promo.
Yeah, but typically at a promo, a promo it's
a monologue.
Right, it's a monologue.
Sometimes it's a conversation.
Right,
but sometimes it is just one person talking to an audience.
But that is basically what a monologue is in theater.
Yeah.
And
I think wrestling is probably more akin to Saturday Night Live in terms of what's on television,
right?
Because it's live, at least.
And
Raw
Saturday
and
Night is also very much
it's a scripted program,
right?
But it's not something where you are rehearsing for weeks or anything. You're kind of
in the moment.
You get one shot at it,
right? Exactly,
and
which is why I love my favorite old SNL sketch is the more cowbell sketch, because because Jimmy Kimmel loses it every so often.
Jimmy Fallon.
Sorry.
Well, Jimmy Fallon loses it in 40 to 60% of
but
his
I love the way Jimmy Fallon loses it because
that is a
because it's like I think like almost anybody in that like with Will Ferrell's performance like almost loses it because I think even like I think like everyone
Christopher Walken too just everything about that.
But regardless of that, so you take that idea in there, the idea of being theater, and it ramped up and you go, that's wrestling, that's awesome, and that's why you have the corporation kind of concept. But then you try to port that to football, and football is this at the time and still is to this degree a very, very different audience. I mean, to the point now where the real drama right now, and I have friends of mine who are thinking of like who watch football who are probably not going to watch this year because of all the is it Kirkpatrick?
Colin Kaepernick stuff.
Kaepernick, you say Kirkpatrick.
Yeah.
Kaepernick
and like everything that Vince McMahon said about the NFL, that it's the no fun league, that it's this totalitarian dictatorship of sport,
right?
Much like FIFA or Bernie Eccleston era Formula One. Thank God he's gone.
We can talk about FIFA later.
Yeah,
we can have a whole document on FIFA.
But like,
I want that document.
Everything he said about the NFL was right, except that the NFL's bigger than ever right now.
Yeah,
and like last year, they did see a significant drop in viewership between how they're handling like the traumatic brain injury thing and concussions to how they handled the Kaepernick thing, which I think really only affects people under 35. I think people over 35 don't get it, or actively are sort of like, he's a terrible person for peacefully protesting in a what I think as peaceful protests go. Just freaking kneeling quietly.
It's like, rock on.
Like literally like Gandhi style. I'm just going to sit here.
What's funny is that
to express my thought and then to coherently and eloquently spell out exactly his grievance, which is not that like everyone's evil. It's that this is a problem I see, and I think more people should look at it, and we should try to solve it.
No, yeah, and even with that, and it's funny, we were talking about earlier the 30 for 30 for OJ, and even that play, shows up with like how the Olympics played in at that point in time and things like that. And I see the parallel to this, and I'm like, this is not bad. This is we should be talking about this. Thank you.
Yeah.
If nothing more, we have the dialogue open.
I feel horrible.
I do too.
That we live in a world where Colin Kaepernick, who is a decent quarterback, can't get a job, and a whole lot of guys who throw freaking interception after interception can.
Yeah.
Because the NFL is so afraid of personality at this point.
Yeah.
Of players having like any sort of public thing and like any sort of controversy, even though I don't think it's controversial, anything he's done.
No. Not in
like
the slightest.
They're so afraid to not have 100% control of everything that they're like, no, we're not going to, like, someone in a back room is like, don't hire him.
Whereas I think that's the entire opposite now for the WWE, especially when I think of
I mean, there are people who have been blacklisted by them who will never be hired for reasons both rational and irrational.
Because I think the guy that's doing like, and only because he's come up in my view more times than not. One, because we share a lot of mutual friends that I've now learned about. We share a lot of mutual fan bases. And I've only talked with him like once or twice, but never like in an in-depth conversation type thing. Austin Creed, or better known as Xavier Woods,
who is awesome.
He is
everything right with the world.
Well, because he has his own like YouTube channel where he's streaming games.
He's got Plan A, which is TV every week, and Plan B, which is his internet friends.
He's part of what's called the nerdy the NPCs, Nerdy People of Color collective, which a lot of my friends are part of. Even I am in a weird way associated with. And he was on Kind of Funny Lives, their things. He's doing inner stuff.
I saw a video of him rapping with Mega Ran.
That was
week.
That was
pretty great.
That was at Kind of Funny
Live. I didn't know. Spit rhymes, but he's pretty okay.
Well, I didn't know Rand was playing Kind of Funny Live, and I was like, oh shit, because that thing is at PAX South this past year at the MagSpace because at that same weekend was also WrestleMania. Was it
It was the Royal Rumble. Was in San Antonio, which I was there for, not at PAX.
Right. So he was in town, And he was there kind of doing like a little bit of promotion, whatever. And one of the Nerdcore guys, like Rand knows him because he's talked with Xavier before, and he's like, "Come over here." One of my friend is performer who's up there, like is a huge fan, and so he walks in and just like, "That's Xavier Woods." Everyone like kind of like makes a thing, and the artist up there, my friend, the guy's his name is Omai, really cool guy, and Vincent Banks, better known as DJ Rockman. They're up there and they look and they go like, "Oh shit. It's Xavier Woods." And the thing is, they have like a wrestle song based on that, and of course, if you know Mega Ran, he's got Matt Maney, he's got New Day Rocks, which is the one we did on Kind of Funny Live with him, and it's so it's cool to know, because even before that, like he'd been on a couple of Game Attack videos there on Screw Attack, stuff like that, and kind of being fun there. And seeing him even at PAX South, he was fucking playing people against in fucking NFL Blitz, one of the best arcade games ever. And
he is one of us,
right? The thing is, like
you have more in common. If you're listening to this, you probably have a lot more in common with Xavier Woods than you know.
Because I'm never. I'm not the biggest wrestling fan. I only knew of him through other friends of mine, and I knew of him because the Bootios thing, the sticker,
he has a very popular gaming channel on YouTube.
That's right. That's
called Up Down Down.
Right. And that's when when I talked with Vincent, he told me all this stuff. I was like, oh, look at this, makes sense now. Now I understand, because I see clips come by, and I don't know what big event it was, but I mean, like obviously in their last big pay-per-view thing, they came out in a giant Bootios box, which is amazing.
They've done that. They came out as Final Fantasy characters,
right?
At
they came out Super Saiyans.
They came out as Dragon Ball Z last year's WrestleMania.
Super Saiyans. I'm like, that's like,
and that's fucking who those guys are,
right? And
they're dorks.
I didn't realize that because
there's a character, there's a girl now, Alexa Bliss, who does low-key cosplay. she has an Iron Man outfit, and it's mostly just colors and themes.
Right.
She has a Freddy Krueger outfit, and like you wonder until you hear her talk about it, and no, this is my I just like dressing up as characters in wrestling gear. I get custom made gear.
Well, because a lot
colors.
of now the wrestlers that are coming in, and I think even some in the past, I think even I'd like to say, because I know The Rock went through football, went through the USFL. I think.
No, he played at the University of Miami.
Okay, University.
He was a world champion there.
Because I can't remember if he had done theater or not.
No, I don't believe so.
I know a lot of the wrestlers now.
Yeah, his dad was a wrestler. His grandfather was a wrestler.
That's right.
He came through it the old-fashioned way, which is
because I know a lot now. A lot of the wrestlers who get into this and want to get serious will also take some sort of theater in either community college level or collegiate level.
It's take theater, take improv classes.
Yeah,
just
all that's helpful.
And
that almost is I'd almost say. And this is why I say I'd almost want to say that might be more valuable.
Improv is probably the way to go.
Only because if I think of even the '90s era, and this this guy is no longer wrestling anymore, but I think I'd like to say one of his kids is
who?
I forgot his Mick Foley. I think.
Yeah, Mick Foley he no longer wrestles. He was on TV for a while, but he had surgery, so he's off.
Right.
His daughter is considering going into wrestling, was trying to become a wrestler.
Something like that.
I didn't follow
Mick Foley
wasn't
the most in shape guy. I'll put it that way.
He was, but no one knew. At times in his career, he very much was.
Right.
But he didn't dress like it, and he was never like a bodybuilder guy. He was just sort of one of those people who's really athletic despite not looking athletic at all.
Right. I guess that's what I'm trying to say is he wasn't the bodybuilder. He wasn't sort of what you consider.
He was in an era of dudes that were jacked, and he was not.
Right. But he played that to his advantage, his humor in terms of things. And so a lot of times I felt, and now looking at even with your Xavier Woods of that, I think having a personality, I think that's something that we're talking about, NFL not wanting personalities, whereas the WWE, and it's bigger than ever. It's such a weird thing because for me
it is and it isn't. It's nowhere near as big as it was in 2001, but it's I think more interesting and diverse than ever.
I think
in terms of having a lot more to offer.
I think that's what I mean is that I feel it's because you think about maybe. Let's just say 3 years ago, for sake of argument, it might have been kind of embarrassing to say you watch wrestling. It might have been.
Oh, wrestling's having a moment right now.
Right, that's what I'm trying to say. This is what
wrestling is having a moment because One, WWE is becoming less of Vince McMahon company and becoming more of Stephanie and Hunter's company.
Right.
And they're just younger and more progressive and more willing to cut some ties with the old ways.
Well, because Vince doesn't give a shit. Vince says,
well, I mean, he does. He still is in charge of creative and still sometimes does genius stuff.
Well, I'm saying what I'm saying he doesn't give a shit.
There's more voices in.
What I'm saying he doesn't give a shit in that. Is it making money? Is it profitable?
He cares.
I mean, but that's what I mean.
He cares a lot.
But in that regard.
But he's got his millions.
Right. But that's not what I'm saying is that he cares in that. Is this going to be a new profitable sector? Because he's never been if you think of wrestling as this concept, when Vince came into the game, and they even talk about this in XFL, there wasn't the concept of how we know wrestling as today.
It wasn't national, it was local. It was regional.
Right. And then he had this idea, and this idea became a multi-billion, I think
it's now a $1 billion
company.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, Vince ain't afraid to do things like, I don't know, make a video game.
Some of the best Nintendo 64 games ever are wrestling games.
Put content behind this weird cable paywall called pay-per-view.
And then create his own network. And then create everything ever.
Right. The point being is
with literally 50 years of history
on it. And two, not afraid to also at this point say, what if we just put it digitally?
Yeah, and it's not perfect.
Right.
You still need cable to watch Raw and SmackDown.
Though. It's still fucking doing shit.
Because the TV deal is so much more lucrative than $10 a month subscriptions. But it's awesome.
But they're trying.
If you like wrestling, go get WWE Network. It's amazing.
But even in that regard, they have the lifeboat in that
they've gotten rid of. They saw pay-per-view as a sinking ship.
Yep.
Now UFC has kind of undone that. But eventually, if UFC decided we're tired of sharing pay-per-view, they'll get to a point where maybe they don't want to do it anymore. But as cable subscriptions die, so will pay-per-view.
Exactly, and that's sort of the idea of that. And again, I see him going. That might be a Hunter and Stephanie kind of.
Well, yeah, I mean now you can if you have Hulu,
right.
You can watch stuff the next day,
right?
But
and that might be
still have to.
That might be
like
a Hunter and a Stephanie initiative.
It's the TV deal is incredibly lucrative. It's something like
that's why
it's like 20 or 25% of their revenue for their current.
I'll
TV
put it this
deal.
Way, if at any
huge.
If at any point in time
that changes,
Vince would be on board, fuck it.
If the TV dried up, they would go digital only and
Vince has
figure it out.
And that's what I'm trying to basically say. Vince has no.
He's not
problem.
afraid to take a chance.
Yeah, exactly.
Wrestling in the early 80s when he took over the company for his dad did not want to go national, and Vince had this idea.
Right.
That you had all of these little wrestling, they were called territories, and it was usually a state or two or three, depending on how big they were.
Right.
And you only ran shows in that area, and your TV only showed in that area. Vince saw cable in the 80s, and he just said at a very early time when no one was, this is the future. We need to get WWF everywhere.
Right.
And ultimately bought up most of the territories.
Yep.
And whoever didn't sell ultimately got run over.
That has been the one thing I have respected on Vince compared to the other other business people. And whether or not you like the guy or not doesn't matter.
He is a controversial character. But you have to respect what he accomplished.
He's a damn good businessman.
He took a carnival business that was still a carnival business
and made it
in the early 80s and made it a $1 billion company in 30 years.
Exactly. And I think that's
and did it with no help.
Yeah.
Did it himself with his people.
And that's kind of why
it ain't perfect. But I respect that a lot.
That's the thing. That's sort of where I am.
And he's mellowed in his old age.
Well, that's again, it's because it's the point of he can play that character again. There's nothing that says he can't.
He can't anymore.
Well,
you have to understand, when he was playing that character, Vince was fucking ripped.
I guess that's a good point.
He was ludicrously in shape and he was in his 50s.
I guess that's a good point. Yeah. He couldn't play the character as
he wouldn't be the same thing. No, you need his daughter and Triple H, Hunter, Paul, whatever you want to call him.
I mean, it's Is he still married to?
Yeah, they're actually married. Although, if you go back in history, they were fake married on TV.
Okay, who's really married? Okay,
they are actually married. Hunter Hearst Helmsley, the wrestler, and Stephanie McMahon.
Is McMahon and his wife still together?
Yeah, him and
because she's now
Linda are still. They've been married forever. Shane has a wife, but
Linda,
she's not on TV.
I'm going to say this really quickly as an aside. Linda may be the only person that is currently in the White House that actually knows shit.
She's qualified for her job. Her job is she's like the Secretary of Small Business. She ran a family business for 30-some years. She's qualified.
I just want to say that before we continue to how weird of a world we are. It's like
how weird of a world. Because
it's like, she's qualified.
Spoiler alert, Vince and Trump have history.
Right.
Trump once shaved Vince's head on live television.
Right.
Over a wrestling match.
But I would say
wrestling's amazing.
But I would say definitely Linda is qualified, which is weird to. I mean,
she is weirdly one of the 3 people Trump hired who's vaguely qualified for their jobs.
Exactly. It's
might not be good at it, but at least on paper.
Well, because she's complaining about like there's a Politico article how she's kind of complaining about how fucked up things are.
Oh my god, it's insane.
Because she actually could do shit.
So not to date this, but we haven't heard the Comey testimony yet, and that's going to be insane.
We'll hear that tomorrow. But the only reason I asked that because even in the history of the WWF. Or WWE, you had Linda I want a divorce, and it's
yes, she was a character on TV. I forgot about that. There was the time that Vince drugged her for several months.
Yeah,
and she was just in a chair and
that's why I have to ask.
Blank stare until the one time she stood up from that chair and kicked him in the balls. Yeah, it was amazing.
That's why I asked these questions of what's real, what's not, because I never know.
Most of it's not real.
That's what I figured. I figured.
If you were going to divorce someone, you would get the hell off of their television.
That's true. That's what I always thought, too. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. It would be the case.
But Hunter and Steph were fake married. Hunter kidnapped Stephanie, drugged her, and married her at a drive-thru chapel in Vegas because wrestling is amazing.
Of course. And then now they're really married.
But then actually after the fact, they, now they're married, have 3 kids, and are happy.
The only thing I ever remember, and this will be the last thing we leave with you on wrestling history, was at one point in time, Triple H, and either for real or for not, was in a relationship with another wrestler, Chyna.
They were actually dated for a while.
Sadly, she did a porno with
X-Pac, who she was with for a very long time after the fact.
Which still, I will say, has one of the best names for a porno.
Yes.
Fuck Debbie Does Dallas. This is One Night in China. I'm just that is such a good play on word shot thing. And I think she's
and that wasn't stolen found footage.
No,
they sold that shit themselves and apparently made a lot of money.
Of course, it's a great title. It's a phenomenal title. I props to whoever pitched that first. I'm that is a double entendre to top all double entendres. All it needed to be was filmed in Beijing. Was it filmed in Beijing? It should have been filmed in Beijing. If not,
I have no idea.
I neither.
I've never seen it. I only know of its existence.
That's good enough. Patrick, we've hit the hour mark. Thank you for coming on, talking about all the weird things we talked about, from XFL to wrestling to politics. Let's say people want to catch stuff, because I know you do. I know you've been doing a lot of with Petey Rave.
Yes,
on his thing.
I do a music podcast called Record Breakers.
Yes,
recordbreakers.com, @4 Record Breakers on Twitter. It's a album of the week show.
Yeah,
sort of the concept being, y'all remember when you were in high school and it was lunchtime and you got to sit and talk. And you'd talk about music, and someone would talk about whatever album they were listening to that week. It's sort of that. So we all listen to a thing and talk about it. So if you like music and you want an excuse to listen to stuff you probably haven't heard before, or go revisit stuff maybe you have, that's literally why we do it, is so we can get new music. Because we
all need some sort of.
I sometimes still listen to the same 12 albums I've been listening to for 15 years, but I need to get some new stuff mixed in there
for sure. Of course, you want to find me. I'm at Vincent404 there in the chat rooms and the Twitters. And you want to catch previous podcasts, you can head to our website, CosmicRadio.TV /8BitLife. There to find links to the show notes, all this other stuff. And of course, if you want to watch live now at 7 p.m. Central, if you happen to be watching live now or you're watching the YouTube version afterwards, we are now streaming officially to Twitch at twitch.tv /CosmicRadio.TV and YouTube at youtube.com /CosmicRadio.TV. So whatever works for you, whether Twitch is a little too slow, maybe you want to go to something that auto, transcodes for you, you can head over there. And of course, if you happen to have some money left over and you look in your pocket and you see, $1.50, head over to patreon.com/8bitlife and help the show become bigger, better, and more awesomer. So that is it for today. So tune next time. Talk to another geek about something completely and utterly random. Bye, people.